Well, my name is Jesse, and I'm here with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. But before I dive into the formal intro, I want to say I always encourage classes to groove at their desks. And Mr. Bradley's class, you guys killed it. So thank you for that in our fun countdown to kick off the broadcast. Way to go. So yes, as I said, Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, if you're new to us, and a lot of you are today, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And you are catching us on a special day because even amidst our regular scheduled awesome programming, today is part of our Peak Discovery series. It's one of our longest standing and most fun things that we do every single year. So in the Peak Discovery series, we get to hang out with the amazing educators, interpreters, scientists at Parks Canada sites in the mountain parks of Alberta and British Columbia, which are not just some of the most beautiful places in Canada, but some of the most beautiful places in the world. I've been very lucky enough to go to see some of these places in person. I hope our entire audience, Canadians and Americans alike, gets that chance as well. But today we want to thank you for joining us as we get to showcase and celebrate these really cool places virtually and talk about all manner of neat topics. Now, I'm kind of sad because it's our penultimate, it's our second last program. Penultimate is your secret word of the day, by the way. We're going to dive in and learning how to keep park waters healthy. This is something that applies not just in Waterton Lakes National Park, which we're going to be talking about today, but really in parks coast to coast to coast across Canada. Some of the lessons you'll learn today apply wherever you might be joining from, whether that's Alberta, Saskatchewan, Newfoundland, Ontario, the like. Some great lessons today. And before I turn you over to Julian to blow your minds and I stop talking, I want to note there will be a Kahoot today. So if you want to play along with a little 4-question quiz between our talk and Q&A, feel free to bring up that game pen, extra way of keeping it interactive and exciting. Now, without further ado, I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to turn you over to Julian to take us away on a journey about keeping park waters healthy. Julian, thank you so much for joining today, man.
Hey, I'm so glad to be here. It's great to be with you and with the classes that we have around today. So I'm going to dive right into this presentation. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the work we're doing here in the parks and a little bit about how you can contribute to keeping park waters healthy.
Fantastic.
All right. So hello, bonjour, ok, as we say in Blackfoot. Again, welcome everyone. And thank you so much for joining us today. As I mentioned, my name is Julian, and I work as an interpreter for Parks Canada in Waterton Lakes National Park, known in Blackfoot as Bukta-Muxikimi. Now, before I get started today, we acknowledge that we are in the territories of the Siksika Sidapi, the Kainai, the Bigani, the Siksika, and the Amskapi Bigani. Bukta-Muxikimi falls within Treaty 7 territory, which includes the Tsuut'ina Nation, Stoney Nakoda, so that's the Bears Paw, the Chiniki, and the Good Stoney, and the Ktunaxa Nation have a connection to Bukta-Muxikimi, and members of Métis Nation Region 3 currently reside in the area. The lands and waters of Bukta-Muxikimi have been used for millennia by Indigenous peoples for sustenance, ceremony, trade, and travel. And we thank them for their continuous stewardship and for sharing the land with us. Now, I know we have many folks joining us today from all over the world. So I encourage you to take a moment and think about the land that you're joining us from and who shares that land. So today we're going to be talking about aquatic invasive species. Over the course of this presentation, I'm going to be chatting about what an aquatic invasive species is, which aquatic invasive species we're most worried about it, and what we can do to slow their spread and help prevent them from establishing themselves in Waterton Lakes National Park. But first, let's talk a little bit about Parks Canada and Waterton Lakes National Park. So one of the main goals of Parks Canada is to protect the cultural and natural heritage of an area. In other words, this means that Parks Canada works to respect and take care of the land that we visit when we come to a national park. This protection extends to the waters, the plants, the animals, the insects, and yes, even the rocks. Now, has anyone joining us today visited a national park or even a national historic site before? If so, which park or site have you visited? Feel free to type your answers in the chat.
Julian, just a really quick note on that. We've got a whole bunch of folks on YouTube, and I'd love to hear from you in the chat about this, but all our live class, every hand shot up. So lucky you guys that you've been to a national park. I've been to many. They're such special places, and I just wanted to dive in and say thank you for that great question.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, sounds like everyone's visited a park before, which is what we love to hear. Now, more specifically, though, has anyone visited Waterton Lakes National Park before?
Let's see, no one in the chat yet. Oh, we got Brett Hutchinson right across the hallway from you. He's been visited that park. That's fantastic.
I have seen Brett around a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, Christina, Miss Kirk's class has. That's fantastic. Way to go, Miss Kirk. Nice.
Great.
There you go.
All right. Now, I know most of you, or not most of you, but some of you are joining from Alberta, so you might have an idea of where Waterton Lakes National Park is, and I know there are some people who have visited already. But for those of you from joining us from farther away, check out this map. So Waterton's located in the far southwestern corner of Alberta, right on the border of BC and the US. Waterton Lakes National Park, or Buktamak-Sakimi in Blackfoot, means the inner sacred lake within the mountains. So as you can guess from the English and Blackfoot names of the area, water is an important part of this national park. In fact, Waterton Lakes National Park is home to an amazing array of species, many of which can be found living in or around water. Now let's take a closer look at some of these amazing creatures. First off, let's meet the American dipper. The American dipper is North America's only aquatic songbird species. Pretty incredible. The American dipper loves rocky streams. Now, this bird gets all of their food from diving into these fast-flowing streams and digging up invertebrates. Okay, so next up, we have a special star, the long-toed salamander. The long-toed salamander has a really interesting life cycle. These salamanders will migrate to shallow water bodies in the spring and lay their eggs in the water. The eggs will then hatch into larvae, which transform into adults, who will then leave the water. Another interesting fact about the long-toed salamander is that during the winter months, salamanders will actually hibernate below ground. Waterton is also home to the West Slope cutthroat trout. Now, the West Slope cutthroat trout prefers colder waters, and they have a red slash under their chin, which helps us identify them. Can you guess which photo is a West Slope cutthroat trout on the screen? You can point to your answer, type it in there.
Pointing at it.
Yeah. Where are you pointing, Jesse?
I think it's number 1. You said the red streak.
Oh, that's right. You got it. Number 1 is correct. So notice the red slash under their chin, hence the name. So all of these species require healthy aquatic habitats to survive. And today we're going to be talking about one of the threats to these habitats. So without further ado, let's dive into talking about aquatic invasive species. To get started, what do you think it means to be invasive? You can go ahead and type your answers in the chat box.
And as with all questions that Julian asked, if you guys get your answers in quickly, I know our YouTubers, you're a little bit delayed, but if you get them in, I can absolutely bring them up and share them. You guys have been such a great audience right now so far. A quick hello to all of WA Day Elementary. Say that 5 times fast. Miss Dollar's class, Miss Ridless-Bocker's class, Miss Kirk. So many of you in the chat. But invasive, what do you think it means? I bet we're going to cover it pretty soon. But if you do chime in, we'll bring it up on screen in a minute. Thanks, Julian.
Yeah, no problem. Do we have the entire school joining us, Jesse?
We've got like every time we've had WA Day come in like hordes every time. So Fort McLeod, you guys rock. So nice to have you in. And then we've got what do we got? We're trying to get some answers for our thing too. So on the invasive note, we've got taking over an area that isn't yours, not native to the environment, comes in to compete with native species. These are really good answers, man.
Yeah, those are excellent answers. So as some of you mentioned, an invasive species is a species that is introduced or spreads to an area outside of where it usually lives. So an aquatic invasive species is an invasive species that is found living in or around water. They can come in all shapes and sizes and can be plants, they can be fish, animals, invertebrates, or even insects. An example of an aquatic invasive species would be if a great white shark were to end up in Waterton Lake. The great white shark would be considered an invasive species because Waterton Lakes National Park is not part of the shark's natural habitat. So while I use the great white shark, it's a bit of a silly example as an aquatic invasive species because they're probably not going to end up here in Waterton. And actually, most invasives are quite small. So you'll meet a few of them today. You may be wondering why the big fuss over such small creatures. They can't have that big of an impact, right? Well, aquatic invasive species can cause a lot of harm. They can be a negative impact to the economy, a negative impact to the environment, a negative impact on human and wildlife health. Additionally, because aquatic species are introduced, they often don't have any natural predators. No predators means that nothing is eating them. So the population of aquatic invasive species can grow and grow and grow. As the population of an aquatic invasive species increases, the impacts they have on the economy, the environment, and human or wildlife health can be quite significant. Now, originally, I was going to talk about a few aquatic invasive species myself, but I thought you might enjoy hearing their stories from them directly. So without further ado, let's meet some aquatic invasive species. So first off, I would like to introduce Quinn the quagga mussel and Zelda the zebra mussel. All right, take it away, you two.
Hi everyone, my name is Quinn the quagga mussel, and this here is Zelda the zebra mussel. As you can probably tell, we've been on the move for quite some time, and boy do we have a story to share. You see, even though we love to travel, there doesn't seem to be a place for us in this ecosystem.
Greetings everyone, you got that right, Quinn. Even though we quite enjoy traveling around the United States and Canada, you humans here don't seem to like us very much.
We're here to share with you our story and shed some light on how we came to be invasive.
You see, we're both from Eastern Europe.
While our hometowns are great and near and dear to our hearts, we were desperate to travel. So when the opportunity arose, we sure as heck jumped on that ship.
That's right, we got on a boat, literally. When we were much younger and in our larval stage, we got scooped up in the ballast water of big ships that were transporting goods back to the United States. Ballast water is used to help stabilize ships. Ships will take in water from the ocean before they leave an area and release this water when they arrive at their new location. As you can imagine, this provides a perfect opportunity for species to spread.
And once we arrived, it was quite easy for us to get around. When we were young and could swim, we would often get scooped up and spread by equipment that had been used in the water but had not been properly cleaned.
Where there's a will, there's a way. For example, as long as things are still damp, like fishing equipment, boats, and even life jackets, we can survive out of water and be transported to new water bodies. Back in the day, when we were just larvae, we were able to visit some awesome places, much to the dismay of humans, unfortunately.
When our youthful days were over and we became adults, we turned into mussels. And you see, we can't exactly travel like we used to. Instead, we like to find a nice, solid surface. And we attach ourselves to these surfaces with our bisel thread, which is basically like a really strong rope.
And hey, Quinn, maybe that is why the humans don't like us here so much. You see, because we like to attach ourselves to hard surfaces, you can often find us living on boats, docks, or even irrigation pipes. And though we don't mean to, we do cause a lot of damage by wrecking these structures.
Not to mention how expensive we are to get rid of. And might I say, your attempts have not been very successful. You see, once we got here, we knew it was the right place to settle. We don't have any predators over here, so we can live quite peacefully without a worry in the world about being eaten. And so we got to work. Both of us can release up to 1 million eggs a season, so we can spread rather quickly once we're established.
Not to mention all the food we eat, and boy is there a lot of it over here. As adults, we eat by filter feeding, which means we pass water through our bodies and remove the nutrients. In fact, we're so good at filter feeding that we often remove all of the nutrients in a water body, which I hear makes it very hard for other species to survive since there isn't much food left for them.
But you see, we don't mean to do all of this. We simply wanted to get out and see the world. It's not our fault that we were brought over.
Sigh. Well, that's enough talking for now. We're on the lookout for our next destination. I hear Waterton Lakes National Park is awfully nice this time of year.
Oh dear, did everyone hear that? Waterton Lakes National Park? Ooh, luckily the quagga and zebra mussels haven't arrived yet, but I could sure use your help in preventing their spread. Do you think you could help me? Yes? Great. Well, first things first. Do you remember how these mussels spread?
Ooh. What do we think? Does anyone want to chime in the chat? I know we're a little delayed, but we can always come. And Mr. Bradley's class, if you guys want to unmute your mic, we can always come to you live too if we have any more questions over the course of this. But maybe for this one, just reiterate how they did it, how they spread, and we'll go from there. Ships attached to hard surfaces. Oh, they're coming in. Now they're pouring in. Yeah, they're so good.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like y'all know how they spread. So that's right. Zebra and quagga mussels spread by attaching to different types of equipment that have been used in an infective water body. Now, equipment can include things like motorboats. You mentioned ships, so that's the obvious one. But there's also things like kayaks and other elements that we wouldn't necessarily think of, like life jackets or even fishing gear. Here are photos of real specimen of dead mussels, showing some of the damage they can cause. As you can see, they can really take over an area. These mussels can harm native mussels by growing on top of them. Not only are zebra and quagga mussels nearly impossible to remove, it's very expensive to try and get rid of them. These mussels are also extremely sharp and can easily cut your feet or hand, so we definitely don't want them establishing themselves on beaches or in swimming areas. Now, Waterton Lakes National Park is also the headwaters for the South Saskatchewan River Basin. South Saskatchewan River Basin is an important water source for many surrounding farms, ranches, and communities. The rivers provide great opportunities for folks to get out and kayak and fish or swim. This means that an invasive mussel infestation could have huge impacts on these waterways. As we learned from Quinn and Zelda, these mussels like to attach themselves to hard surfaces. For example, once they invade, mussels often attach themselves to irrigation pipes. As you can see in this picture, when there are a lot of mussels in the pipes, they risk becoming clogged, making it difficult for water to pass through. Without water, cattle and grain farms may be seriously impacted. Mussels are also extremely costly to remove. So while today's presentation is mostly about how these invasive species impact Waterton Lakes National Park, it's also important to recognize how big of an impact they can have on the surrounding area. But fear not. There is something that we can do to help slow their spread. After using anything in the water, whether it's your inflatable pink flamingo, your goggles, or your kayak, make sure that the item has been properly cleaned, drained, and dried before using it again in a different water body. Do you think you can remember that saying? Clean, drain, and dry? I have a little poem I'd like to say to help me remember. Clean, drain, dry your boat every time you play. Lots of water, wash and scrub, keep invasives away. All right, so the zebra and quagga mussels are two examples of invasive species that may spread throughout Alberta if we're not careful. But they're not the only ones. Let's meet the next aquatic invasive species we're going to talk about today, Myxobolus cerebralis. That's the name of this invasive parasite. Let's hear a little bit more from them directly.
Howdy, my name is
Myxobolus cerebralis.
a tiny parasite that causes whirling disease, and I'm also what you folks would call invasive. You see, I'm originally from Europe, and I'm very new to this area. I was first found in Canada in Banff National Park in 2016. Since then, I've had a great time traveling around Alberta and have spread to many of your beloved water bodies and rivers. Just to name a few of my favorites, I've infected the Bow River, the North Saskatchewan River, the Red Deer River, and not to mention the Old Man River, which I hear is pretty close to Waterton, eh? You could say I've caught the travel bug. So, you may be wondering why the big fuss over such a small parasite. You can't even see me with your naked eyes. Well, as I mentioned, I can cause whirling disease, which is a disease that affects fish, specifically trout, salmon, and whitefish. I don't mean to cause whirling disease, but I just can't help being spread. You make it too easy for me. I'm easily spread by fishing gear that has not been, you guessed it, cleaned, drained, and dried. But I can't do it alone. I need two hosts to complete my life cycle. You see, I am here, and I need to get here. Once I do get to a new water body, these tiny worms called tubifex worms actually swallow me up. The nerve! Then I get released back in the water and enter my next stage, what you humans called my TAM stage. As a TAM, I float around the water and a fish may accidentally ingest me. That's where I get to work. Okay. So you must be wondering how I cause whirling disease. Well, I like to feed them cartilage. So think of the soft tissue that makes up your ear. Yum! So can you guess what age of fish I enjoy munching on the most? Young fish, because they have lots of cartilage before their skeleton starts to form as they get older. When I do infect young fish, I tend to deform the spines, jaws, and gill flaps, which makes it difficult for them to swim. Because the fish can't swim properly, they often swim in circles, hence the name whirling disease. Infected fish are unable to swim away from predators or feed, so unfortunately, they'll often die. When an infected fish dies, the cycle repeats and my spores are released back into the water. But not all fish that swallow me get whirling. Some are resistant. Crazy, I know. Well, I think that's enough for me. I've got to go find some more fish cartilage to eat. Catch you next time?
Oh dear, this is very concerning. The Old Man River, that is very, very, very close to Waterton. Does anyone remember what we can do to help prevent the spread?
I think there was a
Drain and dry your gear, right? One of the main ways whirling diseases spread is from felt-soled wading boots. These are a type of boots people wear when they go fishing. These boots are really difficult to clean, meaning our friend Myxobolus cerebralis can easily hitch a ride. Felt-soled wading boots are actually banned in national parks, which means you're not allowed to use them in places like Waterton. While whirling disease can be easily spread by fishing gear, it can also be spread from anything that comes to contact with the water of an infected water body. So even things like kayak paddles, toy shovels and buckets, and beach balls should all be cleaned before using them again. Another way to help prevent the spread of whirling disease is to never move fish or fish parts to a different water body. That means you never want to release fish into a different water body than the one it came from. And this also includes fish guts if you're fishing. Okay, let's test your whirling disease knowledge. While some fish are resistant to whirling disease, the fish that are infected show symptoms, and they may have a deformed spine, a black tail, a smaller gill flap, larger eyes, or a deformed skull. Take a look at the healthy rainbow trout at the top of the slide versus the rainbow trout with whirling disease at the bottom. Okay, so which fish do you think have whirling disease from the photos on the screen? We're going to give you some time to look at photos 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then if you'd like, you can type your answer in, or I don't know, Jesse, maybe we can even bring a live class in to give us an answer.
That'd be pretty cool. You know, Mr. Bradley's class, you guys all had your hands up really fast in that, so I can come to you if you want to just flick on your microphone. And then YouTubers, if you guys want to keep chiming in, we'd love to hear from you as well. But Mr. Bradley, what do we think?
What do you guys think? Which number?
It's all of them.
Sam says all of them.
All of
We're
them?
saying all of them? Okay.
YouTube is very firm on 3. They are pretty, they're entirely confident that 3 has them. One of our classes said 1 as well. So
Yeah.
we some options here. It's great.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I like that. We got somebody who has the correct answer. So if you guess 1, 2, and 3, that is right. Now, the fish that has the most telltale signs of whirling disease is having those black spots on their tails. But as we remember, it can also cause a kink in the tail. So that's what we see in fish number 2, which is a white fish with a deformed spine. Now, whirling disease only affects fish in the salmon family, like trout and whitefish. So fish number 4, a northern pike, is perfectly safe and immune to that disease. Not only does whirling disease have a negative impact on the health of fish species, whirling disease can also affect humans. Whirling disease can decrease fish population levels, which can make it harder for people to enjoy activities like fishing. But it's important to note that it is still safe for humans to swim in areas infected with whirling disease. Just make sure you clean your equipment properly before you leave. Okay, ready to meet our last aquatic invasive species for today? All right, so without further ado, let's meet Eurasian water milfoil.
Hello, my name is Eurasian water milfoil. You might be quite surprised to see me. I'm just a plant after all. I'm originally from Europe, Asia, and Northern Africa. Like my other invasive friends, I was simply looking to broaden my horizons and explore the world. Similar to the mussels, I first arrived through the ballast water of ships. Once I reached the United States, I got tangled in boat propellers and different recreational equipment, which helped me to spread to new water bodies. It's great. While I don't look very menacing, I'm very fast growing and create dense mats with fellow native milfoil. I grow so quickly that I shade out other aquatic plants, which means they don't receive any sunlight and eventually die. Then, in the fall, when the water gets too cold for me, I'll experience a large die-off and use up all the oxygen in the water, which harms the fish because then they have less oxygen to breathe. Even just a small piece of me can grow into a whole brand new plant, which is great for me because I can easily be spread by your recreational equipment. Well, I must get back to looking for another boat propeller to get tangled in. Maybe I'll even come and visit Waterton sometime.
Man, oh man, yet another invasive threatening Waterton's aquatic ecosystems. Though Eurasian water milfoil doesn't look too harmful, here are some photos of the damage this plant can cause. Notice how dense it grows, and it gets everywhere. This limits the amount of light that can reach other native plants. If we lose too many native plants in an ecosystem, this can cause huge impact to the health of other species. A lot of the time, we view aquatic invasive species as being evil or the bad guys. And while they certainly can cause a lot of harm to other species, the environment, or to us humans, it's not their intent. Just like any other species, they're trying to make a home for themselves. After all, it's us humans that are contributing to the spread of aquatic invasive species through our boats and equipment. So that means it's up to us to slow and prevent their spread. All right, so let's just do a quick recap. In this presentation, we learned about what an aquatic invasive species and the negative impacts they can have on 1, the economy, 2, the environment, and 3, human or wildlife health. We met 4 invasive species that have spread to areas either in Alberta or in Canada and are making their way closer and closer to Waterton Lakes National Park. While these species can spread really quickly and can cause a lot of damage, there's still hope, and it's up to us humans to take the lead on slowing their spread. So next time you're recreating around or in water, you can think about the poem that I shared earlier in this presentation. It goes like this: clean, drain, dry your boat every time you play. Lots of water, wash and scrub. Keep invasives away. You can also help by sharing what you learned today with your friends and family. So thank you so much for listening to my presentation and agreeing to meet all these aquatic invasive species. I think we're going to move to a game of Kahoot now, right, Jesse? And afterwards, I'd be very happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, Julian, we certainly are, and thank you so much for such a spectacular presentation. That was magnificent, man. If you want to come out of screen share, we've got a minute together. Quite a few of you are already in the Kahoot chat, which is awesome. But if you are new to Kahoot, the faster you answer, the more points you get, and what you win is Julian and I's everlasting respect. And I think that's right. Pretty cool. So feel free to chime in. Our game pin is 59361. We're going to give you guys a few seconds just to do that. I want to say a big welcome and thank you again to our amazing audience, both live and on YouTube. You guys were so good in this Q&A session, so we're really excited to have you asking questions of Julian and the Parks Canada team in just a minute. With that, though, I'm going to begin our Kahoot here together. Let's dive in with question 1, and you can still absolutely come in after I've pressed that start button. So here we go.
All right.
3, 2, 1. Question 1. Which aquatic invasive mussel species are making their way to Waterton? We had them. We met them. California dwarf wedge mussels, blue and snuff box mussels, crag and zebra mussels, or horse and rabbit's foot mussels. Let's see. 4, 5, 6. There's many more. You get those answers in. The faster you answer, the more points you get. And let's 20 answers. Yes, you guys knew that down pat. Fantastic job, guys. Let's see what that does to our leaderboard. Glad Sloth takes our lead. Okay.
Oh.
question 2 here together. How do aquatic invasive species cause harm? We just talked about this. Is it negative impact on the economy? Is it negative impact on the environment? Is it negative impact on human or wildlife health? Or, like every time we ever do a Kahoot like this, is it all of the above? That might be your hint. Let's see. Get those in. Get those answers in, guys. 3 seconds left. You guys are amazing. All right. Most of you got this. Yes, all of the above. Julian, these are the problem with aquatic invasive species, that they really do have a negative impact in so many ways.
Yeah.
All right. Glad Sloth keeps our lead. Going into question 3. Could this be a wire-to-wire winner? We'll find out soon. How can you make sure that you're not introducing aquatic invasive animals? Dance on one foot while juggling trouts. Sounds really fun. Clean, drain, dry your pets. Build fish pools in Minecraft. That also sounds fun. Or clean, drain, dry your boat. I don't know. Pets or boats. I think we might have tripped some people up if they were quick with the pets.
Yeah.
You gotta read very.
Or maybe some people just really hope it's juggling trouts.
Maybe 4 people did hope it was juggling trout, and you know what? We like you guys a lot. Clean, drain, dry your boats is correct. Way to go, everyone. Let's see what that does. Glad Sloth almost at a wire-to-wire victory. Wait a minute, I had that in ages. What are some signs of whirling disease? A fish wearing a party hat while dancing in a circle. A deformed spine and black spots in the tail might be in the picture. A gigantic head with very sharp teeth, or a fish that can list all 10 provinces and 3 territories. Some of our classes, I hope you are able to do this too. This is one of the Canadian tests. 44 of you in. Yes, deformed spine and black spot. You guys killed it. You're so amazing. Way to go, Cahooters. Let's see what that does to our leaderboard. And then we are heading to Mr. Bradley's class first. YouTubers keep sharing those questions. Arctic Panthers in third, Witty Dragons in second, and for all the marbles, is it? Could it be? It. Oh, way to go. Let us know who you are in the chat. You guys rock. That was so much fun. Mr. Bradley, I'm going to head to you guys live on camera. Unmute your mic if you've got a question for Julian, anything about keeping park waters healthy, anything we learned today. We'll say hello, and then you can lead us off with our first question. Hey.
All right. It looks like Sam has a question here.
Are there any more invasive species that invade Canada?
Are there other invasive species?
Yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of different invasive species that are threatening to come in Canada or have found their way into Canada already. And in fact, there are many aquatic invasive species that are a threat. There are things like snails, for example, lots of things that are kept as pets, like fish that some people may accidentally release into the wild, can then become an invasive species, an aquatic invasive species. But invasive species in general, there are a lot of them that are in Canada that we are actively trying to manage. One of the big things for us in Waterton, because we're a grasslands ecosystem that's endangered, is trying to keep out invasive plants from the park as well and managing those.
That's a question, guys. And Julian, now you know for the next time you do the presentation, you're going to have to add even more invasive species.
Right? Yeah. 4 is not enough.
Yeah. Mr. Edwards' class, our WA day school, one of them, they wanted to know, how often do you find invasive species in the parks? Is it literally like every time you go, you're like, there they are? Is it a challenge to find them? What's the deal?
Yeah, so it depends on the species. So we have different teams, mostly in resource conservation, that look into these particular aspects. We have detected whirling disease in the Belly River, for example. So there are some that are in the park. The one that we're really, really worried about is the mussels, especially in Waterton Lakes. All of them have a massive impact on the environment. Unfortunately, yes, every time you go out into the park, you're very likely to spot an invasive species. A lot of the ones that we do spot, just because we don't spend so much time in the water, and maybe the plants are a little more obvious ones, are the ones that you'd find out on the hiking trails. So invasive plants that are a huge issue in the park here.
Yeah. Julian, I'm going to ask a kind of question that I don't usually ask, but you might actually know this offhand. So Miss Roberts' class, they wanted to know, is the Pembina River, so this is up near the Athabasca, near Edmonton, are they affected by invasive species too? Is this like a pan-Alberta thing issue that you can speak to, or you know?
To be honest, I would not be certain about the Pembina River particularly. I know that whirling disease is fairly widespread, so I wouldn't be surprised if there is whirling disease there. But again, not a river I necessarily know.
Very good. Thank you very much. I figured I'd worth a shot, and thanks for the
Yeah,
question.
absolutely.
We will take more from you guys in a minute. Let's see. Miss Kirk wants to know how many mussels can connect to a boat. You showed the great picture of the piping under the water.
Yeah. Well, so it depends on the size of the boat, right? But if you have a large kind of freshwater tanker, you could have millions upon millions of them. This is a water bottle that was dipped inside a lake. We'll say Lake Winnipeg, which is infected, and not a lot of surface area, but you probably have several hundred mussels on this bottle. So you can imagine that even on a small craft, you could have thousands of mussels on that boat.
That's a fantastic prop. Thank you so much for bringing that in. It's quite magnificent to see. I remember being a kid and learning about this as an issue as well. And to see an object like that so covered is really, it's wild. It's literally
astonishing.
wild. It's like it's way beyond your wildest expectations of it. We're going to take another one from YouTube, and then Mr. Bradley, we're coming back to you. Are adult fish still at risk of whirling disease, or is it just the young fish? Great question.
Yeah, so adult fish are at risk of whirling disease. Generally, the kind of deformities that you see happen when they're young, when they're growing, but the adult fish can be infected with whirling disease, and they can be impacted by it.
Do you just have a desk full of treasures in front of you? Like that's
I do, yeah. I can. It's like a hat; they just keep coming,
Amazing.
Magic hat of
the hat you put on when you dance in a circle if you're a fish.
Exactly, right? Yeah, multi-purpose, multi-use.
We're gonna head back to Mr. Bradley's class. Come on in, guys. Unmute your mic and take us away. Hey.
Sid has a question for you.
All right, Sid. What's your question?
Do invasive species have an effect on like Ontario lakes?
Are the ones that you talked about, are they in Ontario lakes also?
Yeah, definitely. So the big threat out there has been aquatic invasive mussels, and those have heavily impacted those waterways. And a reason why that is because of boat traffic. So those are used as shipping lanes up the St. Lawrence River into the Great Lakes. And as was mentioned in the presentation, that ballast water, once it gets released, is often heavily contaminated. And that's how those invasives get transferred often into those lakes.
Yeah. My example, I grew up in Toronto, and Lake Erie famously has tons and tons of zebra mussels. Like that's one of the big issues that I learned about as a kid nearby.
Right.
So it's quite amazing. I mean, it's not just a Canadian problem. This is a worldwide issue. Invasive species, it's much easier to transport them around the world now. It's why a lot of places have really, really stringent quarantine regulations to make sure that they don't have that as an issue. Australia, Hawaii are really great examples of that in a global context where a lot of effort is done to make sure that they don't have invasive species. Because as Julian mentioned today, there are so many issues that come about when something gets a foothold in a place that's not meant to be. And it's way more expensive and challenging to clean something up than to prevent it from happening in the first place, which is why clean, drain, dry, so important. So
absolutely. That's right, Jesse.
Let's see. So many more questions, guys. I'm going to take a few more from our YouTube channels. Ooh, okay. Does the species that cause whirling disease have an effect on animals that eat infected fish? If you eat something with whirling disease, do you get it?
No. So as far as I know, there's no real risk to other animal health. It does only impact fish per se.
Yeah.
So same thing, like even if you have whirling disease in a water, it's still safe to swim in for humans. Of course, you don't want to transfer any of that water, that disease into a new water body. So that's why if you go in with a life jacket, you got to make sure to clean, drain, dry that. If you're floating on your pink flamingo, got to keep that clean and make sure you're not transferring any of that whirling disease to new waterways.
I solemnly swear to keep my pink flamingo clean no matter where I go at all given times. And I'm glad we highlighted
Thank you,
that.
Jesse. I appreciate that pledge coming from you.
Mr. Everett's class has a sort of double feature question, really easy. How big do the mussels get and how long do they live? What's the deal?
Yeah, so zebra mussels do not get that big. Generally speaking, you can kind of see that they max out a bit, like about a centimeter or so. I'm not actually certain what the adult lifespan is for a mussel, though, for one of these.
Yeah, I can try and find that out really quickly as sort of like a Google search, but those are tricky questions. Way to stump the expert, guys.
Yeah, good work.
Julian, time flies and you're having fun. We're like literally nearing the end of the broadcast here. So I want to note again for everyone, if you want to check out the entire Peak Discovery series, there's so much more to explore and discover right there. We've got one more broadcast to wrap out the month, Hoot and Howl, coming up on, I think, the 29th of May for the English broadcast. So stay tuned for that. And if you want to watch this one or share it with your friends or talk about Clean, Drain, Dry, it's all on our YouTube channel. So just type in the name of the session and you'll find it there. Before we wrap up, Julian, I'm going to ask one more question from Mr. Bradley's class, and then I'll ask you anything you want to wrap us up after we take the query from them. Mr. Bradley, welcome in one last time. Take us away. One final question.
Yes, and Nazim has a question.
So, talking about whirling disease, how does it affect the spine?
Ooh, yeah.
How does it affect the spine?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So fish have a lot of cartilage in them. And what whirling disease does, it actually kind of gnaws away at that cartilage. So it feeds on the cartilage. So what begins to happen as that's eaten away is that you get a kink in the tail, usually, of the fish. So you can imagine that if your tail's looking like this, it's going to be awfully hard to swim around. So whirling disease doesn't necessarily kill the fish, but it makes it really, really hard potentially for them to feed themselves, to evade predators. So that's some of the ways in which it impacts it. So it eats the cartilage, creates a kink, makes life really hard for those trouts and salmon.
Take it to me that I literally feel really bad for the stuffed fish as you're doing that to it. You're suffering with the real fish. We don't want that to happen. Eating cartilage is not good, even when your cartilage is made of stuffing. Just leave it alone.
Yeah, okay.
Julian, this has been fantastic, man. Is there any final message you want to leave our classes with? We'll bring in Mr. Bradley to say thank you and farewell. YouTubers, you guys have been great, but anything to wrap up our program before we say goodbye?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody for coming in on the program. It's been great to get the chance to talk with you. You had fantastic questions, and I hope you learned a little bit. And we're really counting on you to help us in our mission of keeping our waters clean. And we're really worried about it here at Waterton. As you can see, we are the headwaters of a very special basin, and water is such a present place for us. So we thank you all for your diligence in clean, drain, drying all your gear and making sure we don't spread those aquatic invasive species around.
That couldn't be a better message to wrap up if it tried. Thank you so much, Julian. We're going to bring in Mr. Bradley's class to say thank you and farewell. If you're on YouTube and you want to scream and yell in your classrooms, wherever you're joining from, please do. Annoy the principal. Thank you so much, guys. WSD Johnson. Bye.